So that leads me to say that what we'll discuss tonight is not something that I know very well. Feel free to add your input if you are grammar Nazis. And you
just point at me.
are really adamant about
Well, I pointed before.
So
You're actually good to see that while Ingrid's out of the room. So.
okay. Okay, is she going to correct everything, or she's like, oh my gosh, she was way off this week? Okay, so, or was it a reference to something?
She teaches languages, so it's...
Okay. Yeah, we watched this TV show. It was a really dumb TV show. But the girl on the show was a grammar Nazi, and she kept correcting the guy on the show. You can't end a sentence in a preposition over and over and over again. Okay. So anyways, this is what we're going to talk about tonight. The importance of looking at language, knowing how language works, and knowing there is the drama in knowing this stuff. There's color in knowing it. Okay, this is not a black and white thing. So it's important to know the subject of the verb, and it's important to know the tense of the verb. It's important to know the object of the verb. It's important to know how those things work in sentences, because that's really how.
I'm really moody about that, so it's really not great.
Well, I do now.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay. Awesome. Good. You can chip in a lot.
I
Okay.
really hold myself in check tonight.
Okay.
It's my field. It's my. I teach that for.
Okay. All right. Where was I? So yeah, this is how communication works. It works with looking at grammar, looking at the forms of words, understanding the forms of words, understanding the relationships between the words in a phrase, and in a clause, and in a sentence, and in a paragraph. So this is nerdy stuff. It seems like it's probably a little bit more applicable in some of the denser books in the Bible, like the epistles, but it's really applicable everywhere. And we know that obviously the Bible is written in different languages, so a lot of it you miss, but that's kind of like the importance of a literal translation versus more of like a, what do they call it? A paraphrase, because in a literal translation, they're trying to keep the words kind of in the same order as much as they can when they do the translation. So there's a way that you can still get at the heart of the language with an English translation, which is what most of us are going to use for the rest of our lives. Okay, so with that being said, what we're going to do is we're going to look at grammar, syntax. We'll look at structure a little bit. I don't want to spend too much time on that. There's a lot more that we'll look at with structure when we get into the different genres, because the genres are all structured differently. But there's some examples that we can look at too. And basically what we mean by that, there's literary structure, so there's forms that literature takes that biblical authors use to communicate meaning. So we'll look at those when we get to them. But there's also just a structure of, if you look at Paul's letters, there is a structure that those letters have. And there's lots of similarities between them. And the things that stand out, say in comparison to like Galatians and Philippians, is when Paul breaks from the structure. He doesn't commend them in the beginning of Galatians. He gets right to the point and he corrects them. They've left the gospel for another gospel, which is the seriousness of that situation. Where in Philippians it's more of a combination. So, yeah, we'll see how far we get. But then we want to look at some examples and kind of walk through it together. Okay? Everybody's excited for a grammar day and syntax day? Okay. Does anybody remember learning grammar in school?
Remember diagramming sentences? Okay.
I learned more about grammar in my German class than I did in my English classes.
Yeah.
And my German teacher yelled at me for not having learned it earlier in my English classes.
Sorry.
Those Germans.
When we took Greek, the first chapter in the Greek textbook we used was an English grammar chapter, because he's found that most people don't know English grammar.
You know what I tell my students? I say you get a 2 for 1. You get the English and the German in one sitting.
Okay, it's perfect. Okay, so what do we mean by grammar? What's included in that? Because sometimes people would use grammar and syntax in the same way.
I would think the rules, grammar is applying the rules for which words connect together to create meaning.
Okay, so is that, because I have, okay, so the definitions I used here, grammar would be the forms of words, syntax would be the relationships between the words.
Okay.
So is that more of a syntax thing?
So to be specific, syntax would relate verbs and nouns and things like that, whereas grammar is the conjugations of different words, forms of the words,
Yeah.
tenses.
If they can be conjugated. English doesn't do it as well.
No, English doesn't do it as well. Yeah.
May I pipe in?
Yes, please.
So syntax has to do with how words are connected,
Okay.
and that's the order of words. Versus grammar has to do with what function a word takes in a sentence. If it's a noun, whether it's a subject or an object, and then the meaning could change in different languages. If it's a verb, whether it shows one subject or whether it shows more than one subject, and then it will change. So grammar is the function, syntax is the order in which words are.
Okay, so grammar would be the roles the words play in sentence. Syntax is the relationship or the...
And both deals with nouns and verbs and everything
Yeah.
in between.
Yeah.
But you don't change verbs when it comes to syntax. You change them around where they are at in the sentence. But in grammar, words change. So instead of saying I see he, it becomes I see him.
Uh-huh.
Make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's play with that a little bit. So I see him in the window. Oops, not in the window. In the window. Okay, so we have, what's our verb?
See.
I don't want this. I know this is probably really basic, but there's kind of a point to it. Okay, when we read, we don't normally think this way. So I want to stress the point that you can look at a sentence or a phrase in a lot of detail. And that's going to shed light on what the passage is actually saying. Okay, so see is the verb. Who's doing the seeing?
Hi.
Okay, so this is our subject. Okay, and what is the person seeing?
Him.
Okay, and that would be the
Object.
object. Okay. And then what about this thing over here?
Prepositional phrase.
Prepositional phrase.
Okay, prepositional phrase. How do we know it's a prepositional phrase?
And it has an object of the purpose.
Okay, so you have the preposition in, and what is that telling us? What is this giving us information about?
Locality.
Locality. About who?
About
Or
the
what?
him.
About the him. So the preposition is telling us more information about the object of the verb, and the preposition has a noun that modifies it, right?
Object of
Object of the preposition. Okay. Okay. So how can we change this in a different type of way?
I think there's a couple of ways you could reword it. It's just not any way that we would say it here. I mean, you could say, I in the window see him.
In the window he was seen.
Okay. Okay. In the window he was seen. So we're changing it up a little bit.
You can keep it up in the window, I see him.
Okay. You could do that. Yeah.
If you just want to deal with
if-
syntax.
If you, in the window he was seen. Okay, so so we still have the same verb, seen, but now it's a different tense, and we have a different subject. Or is it an object?
It's not a tense, it's a voice. You change to passive voice.
Okay, awesome.
Sorry.
Thank you. No, thank you.
If you want to-
That's okay. Okay, so, yeah. Did everybody catch that? Okay, so voices of verbs are what?
It shows
Passive.
the agent versus the thing acted upon. There's passive and then there's active.
Okay.
But you
And then is there a middle in, I guess there's middle, is that a voice in English? Middle voice?
Not there in Greek, but
But not in,
not in German. Middle voice. Do you have a middle voice in German?
There's no middle voice in English.
okay,
No.
alright. Okay. So in this sentence then, we still have, so the he is what? Is it the object or the subject? He is the object, right?
Subject.
Subject. He was seen.
Who is seen? He. Subject.
Okay. The person doing the seeing is not mentioned.
Right.
That's the agent,
Okay.
but it's implied.
Okay.
It's a very complicated sentence.
Okay. Let's see if we want to do a different one. So how about we do something more complicated? Not that we're already not confused. Okay, so somebody give me a sentence with an adjective and other stuff too.
The blue ball was kicked by the fast kid.
Okay.
That's good.
Blue.
You want to have a passive voice? We're still stuck in the passive voice if we want to do that.
Do we not want to do that?
You can.
Okay. By the fast kid? What did he kick the blue ball at? His sister.
He quickly kicked or he
Okay.
could add an adverb in there if you want.
Okay, so an adjective is going to do what? It's going to
Describe an noun.
describe a noun. Okay, so the blue ball was kicked. So we have a passive voice. So the ball is receiving the action of the verb. We have the fast kid who is kicking the ball. So what about the by? What does that do, Ingrid?
That's in English. It's a preposition.
Okay.
You have a preposition in place.
Okay.
You could just say the fast kid. Why don't you just go the fast kid?
Kicked the
blue
ball.
ball
Kicked the blue ball.
at the sister.
Do you want me to rewrite it?
If you want to see a passive voice, that's a little it is. I mean, it's totally fine with me, but
Why does it matter if I'm passive voice or not?
because we're not used to that.
Okay.
With grammar, most people find that more complicated. But I'm okay with it.
That is sister. All right. Okay, are we saying the same thing? Okay. Okay, so the kid is fast, he kicked the blue ball. So again, this is object at his sister. Okay, so prepositional phrase. Okay, how about indirect object? Where does that fall into place?
The indirect object?
Yeah. Is the sister the indirect object?
There isn't one in this.
There isn't. So that would have to be kick the blue ball.
You'd have to say the fast boy gave his sister the blue ball if you want to go down
Good.
to the
Or indirect object.
So would it change if it was to his sister? Or is that still a prepositional phrase?
It's still a prepositional phrase.
But that is the indirect object of the preposition.
So sisters becomes the object of the preposition.
You can say with indirect objects what you can paraphrase with prepositional phrases, and it's cleaner and shorter to use an indirect object. And it's 2 or 4 is the indirect object preposition.
2 or 4. Okay, so to his sister would be.
So you could say the fast kid kicked the blue ball to his sister, or gave the blue ball to his sister, or gave his sister the blue ball, and you eliminate the prepositional phrase.
Okay.
Okay, so that's what Mark said.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Okay, anything else? Let's see. Okay, how about, let's talk about conjunctions. Okay, so what's a conjunction?
I just noticed conjunction function.
The conjunction junction.
Conjunction junction, that's it.
Schoolhouse rocks.
Go out there. Joins,
Okay, connecting.
connects.
Okay. Links, I guess. I don't know, links between nouns, stuff like that. You said,
But
okay. And if, did we say?
no.
No.
That is a conjunction.
Is it?
If is a
But
conjunction?
it's a subordinate conjunction,
Oh,
not a mean.
right.
Okay, or let's see.
You can do
However, is that?
Is then?
Are you looking for just the main, that connect 2 main clauses?
Yes.
Okay, so that is one. Then, the time.
What's like for or therefore?
What about because?
It would be because or
I
for.
didn't hear what you
But
said.
it's not a main conjunction.
That's not a main
But
conjunction.
it's a conjunction. You know,
Okay.
it just can't stand on its own.
And so therefore, however,
As, even that, THAT is a conjunction too.
Okay. Let's look at something real quick. We'll just do this for fun. If we're gonna look at, let's see. Okay, yeah, let's go to Philippians. We'll do that one. So we'll do this kind of phrase by phrase. And what we want to do is we want to look at the relationship that's going on in this prayer, between these phrases, between these words. So,
Diagramming Paul's sentences is pretty, especially in Ephesians 1, I mean, it's pretty complex.
oh yeah, Ephesians 1, yeah, we're not going to go there. There's no way. I don't know how many words he has in that sentence. Okay, so this one's a little more simple, I think. But it should be enough of a challenge to help us get something out of it. Okay, so Philippians 1, 9 through 11. And it is my prayer that your love may abound more and more, with knowledge and all discernment, so that you may approve what is excellent, and so be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, to the glory and praise of God. Okay, so I don't want to attempt to diagram a sentence. How would we have grammar specialists in here? Okay, so let's just break this down kind of phrase by phrase. So where do we want to begin? What is Paul's prayer?
That your love may abound more and more.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. So okay, obviously that sentence could stand alone. It could stand by itself. It's a complete thought. It is my prayer that your love may abound more and more. So is this telling us, okay, we'll talk about his prayer. So is this the content of his prayer? This is what he's praying for? Okay. That their love would grow, that it would abound, it would do so more and more. I'm not sure what part of the sentence that is, so. Ingrid? More and more?
Adverb conjunction.
Okay.
It just modifies the abounding.
The abounding.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The next phrase, with what?
Prepositional phrase.
With knowledge and all discernment.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, so prayer that your love may abound more and more with knowledge and all discernment. So we have a coordinated conjunction here. At least that seems to be the idea. Knowledge and discernment being on par with one another. You do have all that modifies the discernment. So the prepositional phrase is going to tell us what about the prayer?
Is that prepositional phrase modifying the love?
Okay, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it connect, that's where it's, yeah, exactly that.
Okay, so it's giving us more information about this.
Yeah.
And it's telling us that this is not an end in itself, but does it come with knowledge or through knowledge, or
Well, that's a,
what's
is it in with the by?
Okay.
And
My translation says in.
yeah,
In
the NES translates it in, ESV
Okay.
translates it with.
Does that give a different idea?
In knowledge and
Concept?
discernment, with knowledge
Wow.
and discernment, alongside of versus in the sphere of.
That was connected to abounding, so they're defining that further. So I think that's the same kind of thing, don't they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, does it modify the more and more, like how does your love abound more and more with knowledge and discernment? So it's more, it does modify the love, but how does it abound more and more? Through or with or in the knowledge and discernment. So I don't know if it modifies the more and more than the love, even though they're all connected. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
Yeah.
Point.
So you're saying, what do you want more of versus in what do you want to abound?
Yeah, how does your love abound more and more?
Mhm.
With the knowledge and discernment, but it's modifying the abound part.
Okay. Okay, so the next phrase, what do we have there?
Give another component, so that.
Okay. Okay, what is the so that doing?
It gives you a cause for something. So there's a goal in mind, there's a purpose for that.
Okay. Okay, so is this, okay, so we have, now, okay, so Paul's prayer is that their love may abound more and more with or in all knowledge and all discernment, so this is going to result in this. This is going to be for the purpose of them approving what is excellent. Okay.
In order that.
In order to that.
And what else?
Again, it's subordinating. This, he's praying for this in order that be sincere and blameless.
Okay. So is this his ultimate purpose, or is the next phrase his ultimate purpose? And so be pure and blameless on the day of Christ? Is that what it says?
Yeah.
Sincere, and he has sincere and blameless.
Okay.
They do seem to depend on each other. You can only approve what is sincere and blameless if you have, you can only do that if you have a sincere and if you're sincere and blameless.
Say it again.
You know how you have the so that followed by the in order that?
Yeah,
And Brad just asked what comes first,
which is the,
right?
yeah.
I think it's a good question. So how would you answer? Can you approve anything that's excellent without being sincere and blameless?
I think we have to be careful with the word sincere by itself. It has to be sincere and blameless. You know, Hitler was pretty sincere. Sincerity by itself isn't necessarily a great virtue.
Mm-hmm.
Should they, yeah, do we do that?
Oh, is this written in kind of order, Brad? The syntax or whatever? Is it causative, I guess, is my question? So is your love abounding more and more with knowledge and discernment? The result of that, you can approve what's excellent, and the result of approving what's excellent being pure and blameless. So, and the result of that is filled with the Spirit, or do they all happen at once?
Well, yeah, I guess.
Is the order he wrote them in originally?
Well, okay, so that's part of like the whole what we're trying to do. What is the relationship?
Cause and effect.
Purpose here seems to be clear.
So that,
Yeah, I mean that's kind of easily understood. Now, of course, you need this to happen in order for this to happen, right?
mhm.
Now, is this, I guess the question would be, is this the result of this phrase here, approving what is excellent? If we do that, if we approve what is excellent, if our love grows, if our love abounds more and more with all knowledge and discernment, we will be able to approve what is excellent. And the result of that is that we would be pure, blameless in the day of Christ.
If that's the case, then just, if we're going to play with this, if that's the case, then the so that you may approve what is excellent has to stay there. Whereas if this was a list of all things that were happening, you could remove the so that you can approve what is excellent, and the sentence would still make sense. And I don't think it does. So your love may abound more and more with knowledge and all discernment, and so be sincere and blameless on the day of Christ Jesus. I think we've skipped something there. So I would have to say, yeah, the love is going to abound with all knowledge and discernment, so that the purpose is that you can approve what is excellent. If you approve what is excellent, you will be, or the purpose of that would be to be pure and blameless on the day of Christ.
Yeah.
Question for you though. What if it's the other way around? I mean, if we're playing around with it, right?
Right.
Because verse 11 in my translation is having been filled. That happens before everything else. It's the perfect tense. What if you need to be filled and before you can even be sincere and blameless enough to approve anything that's excellent and actually grow in real knowledge and have any love? The love being the ultimate goal. See how I'm reading it?
But the having been filled enables all this to occur.
Mm-hmm.
So yours says, NAS is having been filled?
Having been filled with the fruit of righteousness.
Okay, so ESV says just filled.
Yeah.
Filled with the fruit of righteousness. Okay,
Of
so
course
having been filled is yeah, so what is that actually modifying here?
The person, those who he's praying for, the them, which we don't have in the sentence.
Well, it could be the your at the very beginning.
Right.
The your
Yeah.
love.
There
Oh.
should be a your here.
So you could actually read it from the bottom up and see causal relationships.
Interesting.
I don't know if that's how it's intended, but
Well, does it matter that it's being filled with the fruits of righteousness? It's not being filled with the Holy Spirit, it's being filled with fruits. I mean, obviously that would result the same thing, but
I think it may be more that Jesus Christ is the one that brings that through.
The having been filled is obvious, it's passive, present passive.
Which means that it could be the source of everything. It essentially could be stated at the very beginning. Having been filled with all the fruit of righteousness that comes through Christ Jesus, my prayer is that your love would abound more and more.
That's kind
Could
of
be,
what
that
I'm
would,
what I'm playing with is, could you stop there and read
Right.
your way up?
Right.
which would make sense. It starts with Christ and ends in the ultimate goal of our love abounding. I mean, I think that's actually a fun way to put it on its head.
Hmm. Okay, let's see. Filled with the fruit of righteousness.
I mean, it definitely doesn't say like another, and so be, or so that, or because of, or therefore.
We don't have a
at the
conjunction.
end. So it's almost just kind of like, that's just stated at the end, like, this already happened. So it's almost like it definitely, I don't think it seems like you could go from the bottom up, but maybe just like that stated at the beginning. But
now are you done?
because it seems like that you couldn't really reverse some of the other ones just because of the grammar and the way they're written. It does seem that you have to keep them that way because they are the so that. So
Mm-hmm.
just
Mom, look at your pencil.
So the the ESV just says, verse 11 says, filled with the fruit of righteousness?
So, yeah. What are your thoughts on that, Mark?
What's that?
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's Pepe Romanoi, so it is present passive.
Present passive?
So I am filled.
Having plural,
I am being filled.
it's passive. You play raw of. I feel, having been filled, it is, I'm sorry, passive.
So you have been filled.
Yeah, they have been filled.
They have been filled.
No, they should be on there.
Okay.
Because we could read the ESV and we have found the foundation for our righteousness. When my love abounds more and more, and knowledge and discernment, and I prove what is excellent, and I'm pure and blameless, and now I'm filled with the fruit of righteousness.
I don't like that.
Well,
You couldn't if you're true to the grammar.
well, and I think that in the English you could defend that from the ESV. But like we pointed out, it's not in English.
Yeah, the idea of being filled with something is that you're not filling yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
As long as we, well, again in the English, filled, if it's having been filled, then it's definitely passive. Whereas in the English, when I say I'm filled, I could be saying I have filled myself, or I could be saying I have been filled by someone else, but it's not explicit in the word filled.
Okay.
But the Greek is there to point out this is past tense, this is passive.
So in essence, his prayer is rooted in their having been filled.
Yeah. I think so, yeah.
And while the other statements are dependent, like what Amber pointed out, they're dependent so that in order to, this is not dependent on anything, this is an indicative. It's a statement of what has already taken place, connected
Yes.
to the people that he's praying for. Because you could put that up there, and I pray that you, having been filled with the fruits of righteousness,
You could.
would abound in that.
Yeah.
And so I think, Amber, you're right, it's that part is separate of all the other dependent classes. It's a reality about the people that he's writing to.
So the other question then becomes, was Paul's intent in the way he structured this sentence and laid it out, was his intent that he would impress upon us, his readers, the Philippians, the content of his prayer, or the fact of their having been filled? See what I'm saying?
Yeah, how would you answer that question? Is the rest of the surrounding context gonna?
Right? Because he leaves me, he opens me up with that he's praying that our love would abound, but I'm concluding with the root of his prayers is the fact that I've been filled. I mean, I guess they both are there.
The inner working between the two, though, is I would have to say his ultimate point. It's all going to work out.
Yeah.
It's all of its purpose is to the praise and the glory of God.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what the fruit of righteousness is talking about, because it doesn't say righteousness. It says the fruit of righteousness. So are we talking about the fruit of the Spirit, which is righteousness? Or are we talking about that there was a righteousness, and when it came to fruition, it resulted in love and knowledge and discernment and so on and so forth. It resulted in, and what do you call it? Wisdom? I mean, discernment is obviously a good word there.
It seems like he prays for that all the time.
Yeah.
Knowing
So
God's will is, I mean, it's in Colossians, knowing God's will.
right. To where if we say that righteousness is essentially the work of Christ, the fruit of righteousness is the work of Christ in us, in our wisdom and our understanding and our knowledge. You know, I think the phrase fruit of righteousness, for me, would be the thing to look at if I were going to study this completely. What does he mean by fruit of righteousness? That's how I would see this verse if I needed to study it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you look at it only grammatically, there's only one main clause in there, and that it's "and this I pray." Everything else is set off by a subordinate conjunction. You could put a "that" in front of the "your love." That's a subclass. And then in order that, so that, are all subclasses. Verse 11, having been rooted or filled, that's a gerund modifying the people. So the only main class is actually "and this I pray." Subject I, pray, verb, this, object. And so
What's a gerund?
gerund is a descriptor, and that's that having been filled. And so, you asked what is the main point.
Mhm.
It would be the prayer, because that's the only main clause part of this whole spiel. But that's only if you look at it through grammar eyes only.
Well, I think that's what you would want. In a way, that's what you would want to do. Not necessarily having to do it that way all the time,
Right.
but that's going to definitely break it down for you and show you.
So the focus is on the prayer, but the beauty is that it ends in this reality of what's already true about us, describing us as, those filled in that fruit of righteousness. It almost gives us a reason to realize we can do this because this is already true about who we are in Christ.
Mhm.
So it ends in a beautiful, affirming of who we are, and thereby we can actually have hope that this prayer would bring that kind of wisdom or discernment.
Mhm. Yeah, the righteousness thing is that our righteousness or Christ's righteousness? Or both? Or...
Well, the ESV says that's the righteousness that I've earned by being smart.
Mine says which comes through Jesus Christ. Don't go there. Smartness.
Okay. Let's look at a different passage. Okay, let's do 1 Peter 5. Okay, 1 Peter 5, 6 and 7. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him, because he cares for you. Okay. So we have we have the therefore. I don't know where that's,
What's it relate back to?
yeah. Oh, I guess I need to be on that. So is that after the exhortation in NAS or before? Is it humble yourselves therefore, or is it therefore humble yourselves?
In the NAS, it says therefore humble yourselves.
Okay, so one of those linking words that points us back and gives us the reason why he's telling us the command here, or the reason why he's explaining what he's going to explain here. Okay, so we'll look at that in a second. Humble yourselves, what is that?
Admonition.
Admonition.
Reflexive word? Are you looking for?
Okay, yeah, reflexive, yeah. You're doing it to yourself.
Yeah.
Imperative, indicative,
Okay.
imperative. Okay, so we'll call it just a command, I guess. Okay. Under the mighty hand of God. Okay, what is that? What's that doing for us?
Is that whole thing a prepositional phrase?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's is that literal? we haven't mentioned anything like that yet. So the mighty hand is a statue that's back in Jerusalem.
And is it concrete?
Okay, so we have metaphorical language.
Figurative speech, figurative language, metaphor.
Okay, so let's go that arrow back. So the command that's based off of something or a response to something he's already described. We have a would you call it a location of where you're going to be humbling yourself?
It's not a relationship. How, it's not a locality as much as it is how they relate. When you are under God, He is under whom you're humbling yourself.
So if you're going to break this down, will you just call it submission? Or submissiveness? Or under His authority?
You're coming under Him. That's in humility, right?
Okay.
It's still a direction though, because it's not humbling yourselves because you decided to, or humbling yourselves according to your own perspective, or according to your own definition of what humbling is. You're putting yourself under God's definition of pride and humility. So, I understand the question, and I don't know what the answer is, because it's not a locality, though metaphorically it is a locality.
Even the idea of mighty hand is in reference to His power, His, what's it telling us? Why is it mighty hand?
Could be mighty foot.
I think the verse before kind of sheds a little bit of light on that, because it says God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble, so humble yourselves under His mighty hand, because if you don't, his mighty hand will oppose the proud. Maybe?
And that's the therefore.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Which makes sense, that does make sense because it goes on, that he may exalt you. For God is opposed to the proud but gives grace to the humble. Is that grace, the grace of exaltation?
One version says be humbled. I don't know what the Greek actually is, but you say humble yourselves, and the other one says be humbled, as if you're receiving the action. So are we doing the action or are we receiving the action? I can't find the Greek in my whole phone thing.
You'd rather have it on there.
Yeah. It's, I'm looking, it's indicative second person plural, but it's the third person plural, but I think, is it to be humble?
It's a term different accent.
You, here, copy out data? It's the
I'm not sure if I recognize it.
Well, if it's something that is done to you, what you are doing is putting yourself under that mighty hand of God, and He is humbling you.
That he may exalt you at the proper time. That's why I was wondering if,
Right.
if he's humbling you to exalt you, or if you're humbling yourself for him to exalt you.
That's kind of important, isn't it? So which is it?
Yeah.
Does it say active or passive?
well, what translation says be humbled?
That's a good question, because I've been through like 6.
Because we would need to know if it's an imperative
Yeah.
or
Let me
not.
see if I can-
You know, is this a command
Did-
we need to obey? Or, I guess both would be humbled or humble yourself. But kind of important to know if we are doing this, you know, intentionally, or if we are
Yeah.
just having this done.
Either way, it's kind of a willing submission to God. I mean, the result is kind of the same, I think.
I was going to say, even if the humbling is something that you are receiving, identifying the place where it happens at least implies a command that's the same. Place yourself underneath the hand of God and He will humble you. So there's still command implied
Yeah.
if it's not explicit.
It's
That's
the-
why it seems better because there's no verb here, so it seems
Yeah.
better to take it as an imperative.
Yeah.
It's the Berean literal Bible that says be humbled, so I don't know if that's a good one.
Berean,
The Berean literal Bible.
interesting.
And I don't know if this, and I get jumbled with all the grammar stuff, but I think last week, and I think you were talking about it in context maybe of a whole paragraph, but like to ask yourself like the who, what, where, when questions. Like for me, just reading it personally at home, it's like who, us, what, humble ourselves, how, under the hand of God, why, because He opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. I mean, I know that, you know, with the Shirley jingles for, you know, teaching the kids and stuff, that's a lot of how they have you figure out where the grammar is in it by asking, you know, who said such and such, this person, you know, what did they say, or, you know, so those sorts of questions. I don't know if that helps at all.
Well, let's look at so this is this another purpose statement? Okay. We want to call that.
It's a conjunction.
Yeah.
I think that's probably this is probably reflected in the Greek too.
Good.
Okay. And then the next statement, this is where it gets a little fuzzy. casting all your anxieties on Him. And we have to decide, what is this doing?
I'm sorry.
Progressive, no.
Okay,
And then you have because it cares for you.
so that's, what does that tell us there?
Another subordinate conjunction, it tells you the reason.
The reason, okay. Okay, so what is this? What is that? I think in Greek it's a participle.
Mhm.
Okay, so what is that? What is this doing? Is it somehow? Let's see.
In English it's a progressive, and so it's something that's ongoing. So it implies that you're not, it's not something that's completed already in the past. So it almost seems like as you're doing that,
The participle.
right, as you're doing that, you keep casting your cares on Him. So it talks about an ongoing
Okay.
action, even as something else is happening.
Okay, so it's something you're doing in addition to this.
Or, yeah, it's not something that's complete in the past. It's ongoing. So maybe in addition, as you do that,
As you,
you are also casting your cares on Him.
okay, so we're, okay, go ahead.
Well, back to your question, in addition to the humbling yourselves, I think a wrong answer would be that casting your anxieties on Him is humbling yourselves. Because I think that's another way that clause there could be modifying this whole list, is that it is humbling yourselves. I don't think that's the case.
Right.
So just to throw out the wrong answer,
Yeah,
I don't think it's equivalent to the humble yourself.
good point.
But I guess I would be leaning toward the humbling yourselves and all that kind of stuff. The casting all your anxieties on Him comes along with the humbling yourself. So it's different.
But yeah, it's not the same thing as humbling, it's separate. We're to humble and casting.
So why didn't he use a conjunction there? Why didn't he have it and?
I think it's because it needs to come alongside that and be ongoing.
Because they're simultaneous? Okay.
So could it have said while?
He could.
Could have said while,
Yeah.
could have said when, could have said
When.
by
At the
means
same
of.
time.
So those, they're notoriously
No,
difficult
not by
for
means of.
understanding. Not by means of.
Not by means of, because that would get back to what Mark just pointed out.
Well, I mean, it could be that, potentially.
Right.
If this is a,
Oh, right.
if this
okay,
is a participle that's modifying
correct.
this imperative, then it could be taken in any number of 10 different ways.
Sure. But I like what Mark made, I like the point that Mark made, emphasizing that is that he's not saying humbling yourselves is by means of casting
Not
anxiety.
casting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the casting continuous, or is it a one-time
Yeah.
having casted?
I think it's continuous, the progressive, the active,
Participle, that's the English.
yeah, ongoing,
Yeah.
which the humble yourselves would be active as well, not just one time only. Almost like a keep on humbling yourself.
Now, my little footnote here does connect them. They claim that it would be pride that would hold your anxieties. And so I think
Okay.
I think they interpret a little bit loosely, maybe a little bit of a jump in thought there. But whoever wrote this is attempting to say that casting all your anxieties on Him is humbling
It is
yourselves.
humbling.
In which case, he would put in by means of casting all your anxieties on him.
Okay. But the pride is not doing that.
Right. So that
So
that
the
would be
pride
their
is not-
interpretive stance.
Not really about your posture beneath willingly submitting yourself to God.
Right.
It's about not telling God your anxieties. Okay?
Now, we have at least one English translation that says casting all your cares on him because he cares for you. Which sounds like wordplay in the English. Is that wordplay there in the Greek?
Between
The anxieties and cares?
No.
Okay. Because like I said, that sounds like an interesting wordplay in the English, casting all your cares on him because he cares for you. But like I said, it works pretty well in English. I just didn't know if it worked at all like that in the Greek.
okay. Two different words. Yeah, you get that. You get that sometimes. But it doesn't carry over in English very well at all.
This,
I forget what they call it when they use words that begin with the same letter and stuff. But
this one is saying the Greek is the casting is a once for all thing.
What's that?
Everything.
it says it's a once for all. What does that say? Wait, that's a translation.
Casting once for all. In the Greek, I don't know if
It has
that's
it as
right.
an aorist participle?
Yeah.
Huh.
So having cast all your cares would be better. I don't know. I just saw that. Sorry.
So that would be really
Threw that
nice
out
in
there.
English, then they didn't translate that very well.
Yeah.
If it's once for all, you wouldn't see that from
Right.
the casting.
Yeah.
You're right.
It just shows you how translations,
Well, and how important it is to look at the words and
Mhm.
figure
Mhm.
that out, like this, the syntax and grammar's important.
Okay, let's do another one. Which, do you guys want to pick one of these that you want to look at? We have time to do one more, I think. Second Peter's kind of long. Oh yeah, they are. I thought the Romans one is kind of interesting just because of his use of the word for. So he links all of those statements together. But that one's in it's a lot to look at. Okay, let's look at a different different genre. Let's do the John 2 one. So in some of the letters we looked at, Paul and Peter doing that kind of diagramming stuff is kind of helpful, breaking it down phrase by phrase. Gospels, narrative sections are going to be a little bit different. And we'll get into more why that's the case. But it's obviously something that you notice right away. So, let's read John 2, 1 through 11. On the third day there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. And Jesus also was invited to the wedding with his disciples. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now there were 6 stone water jars there for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, Now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast. So they took it. When the master of the feast tasted the water now become wine, and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, Everyone serves the good wine first, and when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now. This, the first of his signs, Jesus did at Cana in Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Okay, so literary features. What are we looking for when we read a narrative passage? What should we be drawing our attention to? We're not going to break down, obviously, each sentence, each phrase in the way that we did with Paul's letters.
We're looking for a plot, a storyline.
Okay.
And so you have a lot of and then, and.
Yeah, you have. So how does it begin? And how do we know that this is one section? For one, we want to determine like the boundaries of it, right? So the third day. What is the reference to the third day? The third day of what? The third day of the week?
You have to go back to previous context.
Okay. Okay, you see if you look back, verse 43, it says the next day. Verse 35, it says the next day.
And then
Verse-
the third day.
Verse 29, it says the next day. So you have these references to certain days. The first day would be you have John the Baptist pointing to Jesus, right? Are you the Messiah? No, I'm not. One's coming after me.
So this is right at the very beginning of his calling the apostles.
Yeah. Very beginning of his ministry. Seems like it could be a reference to the third day of his ministry.
So also in a story you usually have kind of like an exposition, when and who and where are they, and then the story sets in, you know. So you have that there. On the third day, what, a wedding, where are we, Galilee, and who, mother of Jesus. So you have the questions that, you know, that Emma mentioned.
Yeah.
Who, when, and where are we, what's happening, that's your exposition of the storyline. And then it goes into the story in earnest in verse 2.
So Cana mentioned in 1 and 11. So interestingly, he mentions Mary before Jesus, right? Okay, the mother of Jesus was there. So there's this wedding, and the mother of Jesus was there. Okay. And Jesus, let's see, his disciples. Okay, so there's disciples, oops. There's servants.
So Brad, just a quick question. So is that the third day then after John's baptism? When
You know,
he walked us back, you know?
It almost appears that it's either the third day after John's baptism or the third day after he, came across his disciples. But it's I think the bigger point is right at the beginning. I mean, these guys weren't with him for very long.
Okay.
and they're going to a wedding.
I think after that section, it just breaks from it. So you want to know, why does he use those timestamps?
Was there more than, because there's verse 35, again the next day, and then verse 43, again the next day. So it almost seems like with John the Baptist, then the next day, then the next day, and then the third day.
It's like 29.
Oh.
Yeah, 29.
Oh, I missed that one.
So the baptism, and then next day, third
Oh,
day.
but verse 29 is Jesus' baptism with John.
Yeah.
That's when Jesus comes to John. So then,
So it would be 3 days after his baptism.
yeah.
Okay.
Now, of course, there could be a third day reference maybe into later in the gospel, resurrection on the third day.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there is a connection there. I don't know if he mentions it again, but yeah. So this incident is connected definitely with the preceding section. Cana is mentioned in verse 11, like I said. So it begins with the mentioning of Cana in Galilee. It concludes with that too. So it seems like it's a pretty tight-knit unit. Servants, you have the people who are involved. You have the bridegroom.
The master of the feast.
Yeah, master of the feast. There's some information that John throws in there. So you have these conversations that take place between Jesus and the mother. You have the narrator. He mentions in 6, there were 6 stone water jars there for Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Okay, so he's provided the information for us. Somebody has overheard this conversation between the master of the feast and the bridegroom. Yeah, so you have this going on. What is the problem? What is this plot? What does all these interactions revolve around?
Running out of wine.
They're running out of wine. Yes.
Which there's, from going back to last week's study, the historical context, what does that mean for a wedding in Cana of that day? Was it a shame? Those things would be helpful to know from the cultural background.
Yeah. So what you're going to do, your study, you're going to understand what is going on there. I think the master of the feast gives us some information, right? Everybody serves the good wine first, and when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now. So that's part of that shed light on their practice, and part of the significance of what Jesus did. So when he turned the water to wine, he turned it to good wine. And then you have the narrator again in 11, the first of his signs. So the structure of John, if we're talking big structure, you have the prologue in the beginning. So then you have, this is kind of what theologians have called it, the book of signs. So does that go through 12, Mark? You did this in Sunday school last year, right?
I think so.
Well, doesn't it go through, even back through 20? Because it's in 20 where he says, these signs he performed?
The descriptive is in verse 20, and it depends on if you call the miraculous catch of fish at the very end after the resurrection a sign or not.
Yeah.
Does John call it a sign?
John MacArthur calls it a sign, but John doesn't, no.
Okay. Thanks for that.
But it does seem that that statement, these signs he performed, that if they would all be recorded, that whole seems that it seems reflective of the entire book.
20s. Any of we'll call the fish story the epilogue. Not a sign. Okay, so the statement at the end. So this is what we did talk about last week, is that when you're reading something and the author tells you why he's writing something, then that should shed light on everything that he's written. So when he says, 20 verse 30, Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. So he tells you why he's writing the book. But it does mention signs, it does wrap that first section of the book, which revolves around those 7 signs. Wraps it up quite nicely. And then in chapter 21 you have, it seems like the gospel should end right there at 20, but then 21 is there.
Right.
Okay.
Epilogue.
All right. So we have the need of wine. We have the need to understand the historical background to it. What was the practice of weddings in Jewish culture, or actually in Galilee? Is this different than a Jewish wedding? Is this the same thing as a Jewish wedding? We would need to understand that. We would need to understand Jewish rites of purification. What are these jars doing here? We would want to understand, what is this sign for? When you read this through the first time without knowing the end of the book and what the purpose of it is, you think, well, that's interesting. The first of his signs he did here. How many more signs did he do? What is the sign for? The sign, he manifested his glory through the sign. I don't know if that phrase accompanies any of the other signs, but you see in the second half of John, it is about his glory. The glory when he will be lifted up from the earth. Okay, so you do have that theme in the beginning here too. So how do we get at the significance of this?
The significance of this section?
Of this section, yeah.
Do you watch for typical issues or tools used in storytelling? I mean, are you looking for a climax? Are you looking for a conclusion? You look for the response of the people or the response that the author gave?
I mean, I think you can. You look at all those things, right?
And you, because it's kind of a story within a story, it's one of the signs within the bigger context of all the signs he performed in order to, that last verse that you just read. So you do the storyline of the individual story, like you said, what's the problem? That's the rising action, and you would have a climax and a resolve. And so you kind of have this whole little story wrapped up like a typical storyline. But then there's this bigger picture of why Jesus is doing that in the first place, and that's where the whole backdrop of all of John would come in.
Okay. He mentions in the end of verse 11, and his disciples believed in him. So you see the result of this. So those that he's called to himself in the first chapter, whoever they were, if they were all 12 of them there at this time, I don't know.
But even before that, where it says it manifested his glory, I mean, there was a specific purpose that he had in doing this to reveal something.
If the entire purpose of the whole deal is to manifest his glory so his disciples could believe in him, could it be implied that it could have been any miracle? Could it have been any miraculous work? If the intent was to manifest his glory and for them to believe, could he have cursed a fig tree You know, could he have called lightning down? Or is there something about the sign itself that manifested his glory? Or was there something, a message behind the sign that was the thing that they were believing in? Or do we just say, miraculous sign was amazing and the people believe that he's amazing?
Yeah, I think the signs did seem to have a significance beyond, I mean, it wasn't a random thing.
Right.
He could have taken and chosen random things to do the signs, but taking bread in the wilderness and feeding 5,000 people, that seems to have really clear allusions back to manna in the wilderness and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, even here, the mentioning of the rites of purification. So why does John add that information there? He could have said there's 6 jars, there's some water and some jars. I mean, he mentions the fact that they're filled to the brim, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's something going on there as well. In those little details, he's giving us information about, I think, the significance of it.
Yeah, because in the detail, there seems to be more to it than it's just a miracle.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, as Marcus made the point, you know, it could have just been anything. He could have saved the baby from getting trampled in the street or something, you know, just, you know, stop the horse or whatever, you know, I mean, could he have done, you know, stop a tree from falling and accomplished the same objective? In one sense, he would have manifested his glory, but all the other things wouldn't have come out in it that we see. There's more than just a manifestation of his glory. The sign is more than that.
So to a Jewish audience, would it have been a little sacrilegious to use, you know, what was meant for purification for, you know, wine, drinking, a party? Would they have kind of chafed at that? And it would have shown us a character of, you know, Jesus that later on.
It's a little bit of a rebel, isn't
Yeah,
it?
he kind of goes against the Jewish, you know, where he later on does things that they find very offensive because he takes care of the needs of the people and he's down on earth with the people, versus, you know, the Jewish rites having to do with purification.
Definitely. I don't see why, yeah. I don't understand, I'd have to understand more of what the jars were there for, but yeah.
Washings, you know, ceremonial washings.
Yeah, before weddings, is it, they just happen to be at the same
I
spot?
think it just happened to be this, I mean, part of their household is there's a lot of ceremonial washings that are necessary, and they have water pots.
They would even wash before and after eating, so.
Yeah.
I've heard say the 6 signifies that Christ was starting his mission but hasn't finished it yet. It's there's more to come and I will finish it, just like the 6 measures of barley and growth or whatever.
See, and that brings up another point that I think is, we have to be careful as far as what we read into it. It's not explicit. That would be something that would be, maybe someone implicit says, well, it seems like it's there.
It could be.
It could be, but are we going to be dogmatic on that point?
Like all the numerology.
Right.
Right.
Or even the 3rd day. You know, you brought this up.
Yeah.
Should we read into that some special meaning that this is the 3rd day? Wow, gee, he was raised on the 3rd day. Maybe, you know, well, perhaps, but the author doesn't, you know, doesn't.
John does a lot of weird things. And I think he has deeper meanings, if you want to call it that. Subversive, you know, underneath the surface meanings in a lot of the stuff. So I would have put it past him if he implied something like that.
The greater part of our whole evening on grammar, syntax, these things that we're looking at, is really that, yes, we're not reading the Spokesman Review, and we're not reading the Reader's Digest, we're reading the Word of God, and yet God has communicated to us through the means of human language, written language, and therefore we can apply rules to understand it. It's not a book that we're just going to, you know, it's this mysterious kind of thing. We can still apply objective, cognitive reasoning when it comes to text.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is, you know, in recognizing that they can use words in, I guess, more than one way, doesn't mean that scripture cannot, or is difficult to understand, can't be understood. Applying normal rules of grammar, normal rules of syntax, understanding historical context, understanding the big picture of the Bible, allows us to actually get at, you know, what's going on there. So the encouragement is just to read it in that way. You know, to look for those things and try to understand how those things relate to each other. So yeah, definitely, it is amazing.
Yeah. But it also throws, I mean, in the same breath, it throws off the idea that, well, this is God's word and he has his meanings attached to it, you know, one commonly used, you know, 2 Peter 3, is it 3:8, you know, to the Lord of the days is 1,000 years, so every reference to a day is God's timing, and therefore we should see it in his way. That's not how he communicates. If that was the purpose, his objective, it would take away all meaning. But he's communicated to us with the rules of grammar that we can apply, and so forth.
Okay, good place to end.
Good stuff.